February 1943, Tunisia. German Tiger tanks advance with a confidence bordering on arrogance. Until now, nothing the British have fielded has been able to reliably stop them. The Tiger's frontal armor, up to 100 mm of rolled steel, has shrugged off every Allied anti-tank weapon it has faced. The 2-pounder simply bounces. The 6-pounder struggles except at dangerously close range. Even the American 75 mm gun, powerful by earlier standards, is ineffective unless fired from point-blank distance. Tiger crews behave accordingly. They expose themselves, linger in the open, and press attacks that would have been suicidal in earlier campaigns. For the moment, they appear untouchable. Then the fighting at Hunt's Gap changes everything. Over several days of savage combat, Tigers are stopped, damaged, and destroyed in ways that should not have been possible. Some are immobilized by mines. Others are battered into submission by concentrated artillery fire. Several are knocked out at ranges where British guns were never expected to penetrate. The losses are severe enough that German unit histories would later refer to the area as a Tiger graveyard. And among the chaos, British gunners unveil a weapon that looks almost absurd in scale. Its barrel is so long it seems impractical. Its carriage looks improvised, strained, and barely capable of handling the violent recoil it produces. This is the first battlefield appearance of the 17-pounder anti-tank gun. What makes this moment remarkable is not simply what the 17-pounder achieves in Tunisia, but when it was conceived. Development of the gun began not in response to the Tiger, but long before it even existed. In November 1940, more than 2 years before the first Tiger rolled off a German production line, British ordnance designers met in London to discuss a problem they knew was coming. Tank armor was getting thicker. Everyone understood this. The question was whether anyone would act in time. At the start of the war, the British Army relied on the 2-pounder anti-tank gun. In 1940 it was adequate, capable of penetrating roughly 40 mm of armor at 500 yards. But its limitations were already obvious. It lacked a high explosive round, struggled against sloped armor, and left little room for future growth. The 6-pounder, then still in development, promised improved performance, with penetration approaching 75 mm under ideal conditions. But even that would not be enough for long. British intelligence assessments painted a worrying picture. Reports suggested that Germany was already experimenting with heavy tanks carrying frontal armor in excess of 100 mm. Whether these estimates were accurate almost didn't matter. The trend was unmistakable. Armor thickness was increasing faster than gun performance. If that gap was not closed, British armored forces would soon find themselves hopelessly outmatched. Events in North Africa reinforced these fears. British tank crews discovered that German anti-tank guns could destroy their vehicles at ranges where British weapons were ineffective. The Matilda, once considered nearly invulnerable, was losing its advantage. The Crusaders 2-pounder was clearly inadequate. Even the new American-built Grants and Shermans arriving in theater carried 75 mm guns optimized for infantry support rather than tank killing. Against current German armor they struggled. Against future designs, they would be helpless. Recognizing this, the British Ordnance Committee took decisive action. On May 15, 1941, it formally authorized development of a new anti-tank gun with extraordinary performance requirements. The weapon would need to penetrate between 120 and 150 mm of armor at a range of 730 meters. This was far beyond anything then in service. The specification called for a 3-inch caliber gun firing a 17-pound projectile at unprecedented velocity. One seemingly bureaucratic decision would later prove crucial. In April 1941, the committee mandated that the gun be designed as a single system suitable for both towed anti-tank and tank-mounted use. At the time, this requirement complicated the design process. In retrospect, it made possible one of the most important armored conversions of the war, the Sherman Firefly. The technical challenge facing designers at the Royal Ordnance Factory, Woolwich, was immense. To achieve the required penetration, the projectile needed a muzzle velocity exceeding 900 meters per second, roughly 3 times the speed of sound. No existing British anti-tank gun operated anywhere near that level. Achieving such velocity demanded a barrel approximately 55 calibers long, stretching more than 4 meters, along with a breech capable of withstanding chamber pressures that would tear lesser weapons apart. Recoil was another critical problem. The forces generated by firing such a powerful round threatened to destroy any conventional mounting. Absorbing that energy safely would require a carriage far stronger than anything currently in production. Every component, from the rifling to the recoil cylinders, had to be redesigned. Despite these challenges, prototypes were ready for testing by early 1942. The results were startling. The gun exceeded its design goals, achieving a muzzle velocity approaching 900 meters per second and delivering penetration figures that rendered existing anti-tank weapons obsolete overnight. On May 1, 1942, the weapon was officially approved for service as the Ordnance Quick-Firing 17-pounder. Approval, however, did not mean readiness. The most serious obstacle remained unresolved: the carriage. The massive split-trail carriage required to safely handle the gun's recoil proved extraordinarily difficult to manufacture. Production lagged far behind schedule. As months passed, the gun existed largely on paper while the battlefield situation deteriorated. By autumn 1942, British intelligence confirmed that Tiger tanks were already appearing in North Africa. The very threat the 17-pounder had been designed to counter had arrived early. British forces urgently needed the gun, but the proper carriages simply did not exist in sufficient numbers. Waiting was not an option. The solution was pure wartime improvisation. Engineers mounted the 17-pounder barrel onto the carriage of the 25-pounder field gun, creating a hybrid weapon officially designated the 17-pounder on 25-pounder carriage, but universally known by its nickname, Pheasant. The 25-pounder's box-trail carriage had never been designed to handle such extreme recoil. Every shot pushed the system to its mechanical limits. Yet, remarkably, it worked. The first 100 of these improvised guns were rushed to North Africa before proper carriages were available. British commanders knowingly sent a weapon to war mounted on equipment that might shake itself apart under sustained fire. It was a calculated gamble born of necessity. In the deserts of Tunisia, that gamble would soon be tested against Germany's most feared tank. March 1943, southern Tunisia. The improvised 17-pounders arrive at the front just in time. Mounted on 25-pounder carriages never designed to absorb such violence, the guns look ungainly and overstressed. British crews know they are firing a weapon pushed to the edge of its mechanical limits. Every shot sends shockwaves through the carriage. Bolts loosen. Metal flexes. But when the shells strike German armor, the results are unmistakable. For the first time, Tigers are no longer immune. The true trial comes on March 6 at Medellin. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel launches what will become his final offensive in North Africa. The attack is ambitious, involving roughly 150 German tanks and assault guns advancing against prepared British defenses. What Rommel does not fully appreciate is how deeply the British have learned from earlier defeats. Nearly 470 anti-tank guns are waiting, carefully dug in, overlapping their fields of fire. Among them are the first operational 17-pounders. As the German armor advances, it runs headlong into a wall of fire. Mines halt vehicles and channel movement. Artillery crashes down with crushing effect. When Tigers finally come into view, British gunners engage at ranges that would previously have been futile. This time, shells do not bounce. Hits strike with devastating force. Tigers are penetrated, immobilized, or abandoned by shaken crews. The attack collapses. Rommel withdraws, and with it ends any realistic Axis hope of regaining the initiative in North Africa. Captured German vehicles confirm what the battlefield has already proven. British testing of knocked-out Tigers shows that the 17-pounder can penetrate Tiger frontal armor at practical combat ranges. Even when penetration does not occur, the sheer kinetic energy of the round causes catastrophic internal damage. Spalling turns the interior of the tank into a lethal storm of metal fragments. For the first time, Tiger crews must fear being hit from the front. With the arrival of proper split-trail carriages later in 1943, the improvised Pheasant guns are gradually withdrawn from frontline use. Their job, however, is already done. They have proven the concept under combat conditions and validated the gun's extraordinary performance. By the time Allied forces land in Sicily in July 1943, the 17-pounder is a mature, respected weapon. Its technical characteristics explain why. The gun fires a 7.7 kilogram armor-piercing projectile from a barrel over 4 meters long. Muzzle velocity approaches 900 meters per second. At 500 meters, standard APC-BC ammunition can penetrate approximately 160 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. At 1,000 meters, penetration remains around 150 millimeters. These figures place every German tank in service, Panzer IV, Panther, and Tiger, well within lethal range. Yet the most dramatic leap in performance comes with the development of a revolutionary ammunition type, armor-piercing discarding sabot, or APDS. British researchers at the Armament Research Department refine an idea first explored by the French before the war. Instead of firing a full-caliber projectile, APDS uses a small, dense tungsten carbide penetrator held in place by a lightweight sabot. Once the round leaves the barrel, the sabot falls away, allowing the penetrator to continue toward the target at extreme velocity. The advantages are enormous. The APDS penetrator weighs roughly 3.5 kilograms, less than half the weight of a standard round. This reduced mass allows muzzle velocity to reach over 1,200 meters per second. Penetration figures are unprecedented. At 500 meters, APDS can defeat more than 250 millimeters of armor. Even at 1,000 meters, penetration remains far beyond what any German tank can withstand. On paper, APDS appears to make German heavy armor obsolete overnight. In practice, the ammunition has serious drawbacks. Accuracy suffers due to poor sabot separation, and dispersion increases significantly at longer ranges. Ammunition supply is also limited. Tungsten is scarce, and production never meets demand. As a result, APDS is issued sparingly and reserved for critical targets. Most crews continue to rely primarily on APCBC rounds for routine engagements. Even so, the psychological impact is immense. British tankers and anti-tank gunners know they finally possess a weapon capable of killing anything they encounter. Confidence returns. Tactics evolve. Instead of closing to suicidal distances, crews engage from positions of advantage, knowing their gun will do the work. The next challenge is mounting the 17-pounder in armored vehicles. The official solution is the A-30 Challenger tank, designed specifically to carry the gun. On paper, it seems logical. In reality, it is deeply flawed. The vehicle is tall, lightly armored, and mechanically unreliable. Its silhouette makes it an easy target, and crews have little faith in its survivability. Production remains limited, and the Challenger never becomes the answer British armored units need. That answer comes instead from improvisation once again. Engineers at Vickers, led by WGK Kilbourne, propose an audacious idea: install the 17-pounder into the standard American Sherman tank. The proposal is initially dismissed as impossible. The Sherman's turret ring is too small. The breech is too large. The recoil system is too long. Every measurement argues against success. Kilbourne and his team solve the problems one by one. The recoil cylinders are shortened. The breech is rotated 90 degrees to fit within the turret. The radio is relocated into an armored box welded onto the rear of the turret. The hull machine gunner position is removed to make space for ammunition storage, reducing the crew to 4. The result is cramped, awkward, and difficult to operate, but it works. The Sherman Firefly is born. By the spring of 1944, Fireflies are entering service in growing numbers. Each British armoured troop typically receives one Firefly for every 3 standard Shermans. The long barrel is unmistakable, immediately identifying the tank as a high-value threat. German crews quickly learn to recognize it, and veteran accounts suggest Fireflies become priority targets whenever possible. British crews respond with ingenuity. Barrels are counter-shaded with white paint on the underside to disguise their length. Fake muzzle brakes are added midway down the barrel to make it resemble the shorter 75mm gun. Some units even mount dummy barrels while hiding the real gun beneath foliage. Whether or not German doctrine formally mandates targeting Fireflies first, British crews clearly believe the danger is real. By the time Allied forces land in Normandy in June 1944, the 17-pounder is no longer an experiment or an emergency measure. It is a proven battlefield weapon, carried into combat by crews who trust it completely. In the hedgerows of France, the gun will face its ultimate test against Germany's best armored formations, and redefine the balance of armored warfare in the West. June 1944, Normandy. The Allied landings succeed, but once the fighting moves inland, British and Canadian armored units encounter the true test of the campaign. The bocage, tight hedgerows, sunken lanes, and short sight lines favors the defender. German panzer divisions, including elite Waffen-SS formations, counterattack aggressively. Panthers and Tigers appear in increasing numbers. In this terrain, raw armor and firepower matter more than speed or maneuver. It is here that the 17-pounder earns its reputation. The Sherman Firefly becomes the most important British tank of the campaign. Issued sparingly, usually one per troop, it is not meant to replace standard Shermans, but to support them. Its role is simple and deadly. Kill German heavy armor so the rest of the troop can operate. German crews quickly learn that the long-barreled Sherman is the real threat. Veteran accounts consistently state that Fireflies were engaged as priority targets whenever identified. British crews adapt accordingly. Firefly commanders learn that survival depends on movement and concealment. The rule becomes instinctive: shoot and move. Fireflies rarely fire twice from the same position. Their distinctive silhouette draws return fire almost immediately. The gun's power is unmatched, but its visibility is a constant danger. On June 9, 1944, near Normandy, the threat becomes unmistakable. Lieutenant G.K. Henry's Firefly engages a force of Panthers from the 12th SS Panzer Division. The German attack should have overwhelmed the British position. Instead, Trooper Chapman, Henry's gunner, destroys 5 Panthers with just 6 rounds. The German assault collapses. 7 of the 12 Panthers committed are knocked out. 1 gun has stopped an armored attack. 5 days later, near Lingevres, Sergeant Harris of the 40th 70th Dragoon Guards demonstrates the tactical flexibility the Firefly allows. Engaging Panthers near Tilly-sur-Seulles, Harris repeatedly changes position between shots, avoiding return fire while destroying 5 German tanks. His actions are later documented by the Imperial War Museum. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect a pattern repeated across Normandy. The most famous engagement occurs on August 8, 1944, during Operation Totalize. Near Saint-Aignan-de-Cremesnil, a Firefly of the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, named Velika Luki, spots German Tigers advancing along Route National 158. The gunner, Trooper Joe Eakins, opens fire. In approximately 12 minutes, he destroys 3 Tiger tanks and a Panzer IV. The regimental war diary records the turret numbers of the destroyed Tigers: 312, 007, and 314. Tank 007 is widely accepted by historians as belonging to Michael Wittmann, Germany's most famous tank ace. Wittmann had built his reputation on the invincibility of the Tiger, destroying British armor at Villers-Bocage with near impunity. 2 months later, he is killed by a gun designed before his tank even existed. The symbolism is hard to ignore. The hunter has become the hunted. Beyond the Firefly, the 17-pounder appears on other platforms, each reflecting British tactical thinking. The Archer tank destroyer mounts the gun facing rearward on a Valentine chassis. The layout looks absurd, but it serves a purpose. After firing, the Archer can immediately withdraw at speed without turning around. Built in 655 examples, Archers are well liked by Royal Artillery crews and often preferred to American M10s. The Achilles represents another adaptation. American M10 tank destroyers are refitted with a 17-pounder, replacing their original 76mm gun. Around 1,100 are converted. This makes the Achilles the second most numerous armored vehicle to carry the gun, after the Firefly. Comparative trials explain why the 17-pounder inspires such confidence. Against the American 76mm M1 gun, the British weapon penetrates roughly 118mm of armor at 1,000 yards, compared to about 89mm for the American gun. Against the German 88mm kilowatt K36, the Tiger's own weapon, the 17-pounder actually penetrates more armor at comparable ranges. British crews facing Tigers often carry a gun more powerful than the Tiger itself. Soviet evaluators test the 17-pounder at Gorokovets Proving Ground and conclude that its performance matches their own 100mm BS-3 anti-tank gun. This is significant praise from an army with immense experience fighting German armor on the Eastern Front. The weapon is not without flaws. APDS ammunition suffers from poor accuracy due to inconsistent sabot separation. Field modifications to muzzle brakes improve performance, but dispersion remains an issue throughout the war. As a result, most crews rely primarily on APCBC rounds, using APDS only when absolutely necessary. Myths also persist. Claims that Germans always targeted Fireflies first are difficult to prove conclusively, though German manuals do acknowledge the threat posed by long-barreled Shermans. What is beyond debate is the psychological effect. German crews fear the Firefly, and British crews trust it. By war's end, approximately 15,000 17-pounders are produced in all variants. Over 4,000 armored vehicles mount the gun. The towed version weighs around 3 long tons, requires a crew of 5 to 6, and can fire 10 aimed rounds per minute. The gun continues to serve after the war, seeing action in Korea and remaining in use with several armies into the 1980s. Its greatest legacy lies in what follows. The British Centurion tank is designed around the 17-pounder from the outset. Though it arrives too late to see combat in Europe, it carries forward every lesson learned from Tunisia and Normandy. The emphasis on high-velocity firepower leads directly to the development of the L7 105mm gun, which becomes the NATO standard in arms tanks across the world, including those of former adversaries. The story ends where it began, Tunisia, February 1943. Tiger crews advanced believing themselves invulnerable. Nothing in Allied service could threaten them from the front. They were wrong. In a London meeting room more than 2 years earlier, British engineers had already anticipated the problem and begun building the solution. The 17-pounder looked oversized because it was meant to be. The improvised carriage looked wrong because desperation demanded speed over perfection. This was not luck. It was foresight, engineering discipline, and the willingness to gamble when waiting meant defeat. German engineering produced the most feared tank of the war. British engineering produced the gun that killed it.